Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for coming to this seminar. Although Joe can speak some Spanish, I think I will introduce him in English, and he will conduct the seminar in English too, but maybe if you have maybe later questions, maybe it's possible to do them in Spanish. Okay, I would like to present Joe Miller, who will now conduct this seminar. Joe Miller is since last year the director of the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, an international network and research infrastructure funded by the world's governments that aims at providing anyone, anywhere, open access to data about all types of life on Earth. Before coming to GBIF, Joe Miller was working at the National Science Foundation in US, where he promoted international research collaborations and managed the funding programs in biodiversity science. And before that, Joe Miller was a senior research scientist at the Australian National Herbarium in Canberra, in Australia. Joe has a PhD in plant genetics from the University of Wisconsin. He continues to research and publish on topics in plant systematics, biography, and biodiversity informatics, focusing mainly on the Australian flora. I'd like to take the chance to thank Joe Miller for being here today for many reasons, but I would like to highlight two things. I think this is a great chance to increase the visibility of the work that GBIF and GBIF Spain do to support biodiversity conservation. We feel supported by the director of the GBIF and the entire network, which give us the strength to keep working as we have been doing in the past. In addition, I was lucky to attend some seminars and presentations given by Joe Miller, and I thought it is great that he can speak to a Spanish audience to discuss with you the lead role that GBIF plays to increase the quality and quantity of open biodiversity data 20 years after its foundation, as well as maybe discuss the future landscape and challenges of this network. So I really want to thank Joe for his support and for making this trip to Madrid so easy and for being such a pleasant company. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I just want to apologize for not speaking Spanish. I spoke Spanish 30 years ago, but I haven't spoken it on a daily basis for 30 years, so I'm sure that you will understand more if I speak in English, so I apologize. But thanks for having me today. It's an honor to be here. I've never been to the gardens and facilities. I'm assuming a little bit of baseline knowledge on GBIF. I'm going to have a few introductory slides, and I hope I have a few researchers and in the audience as well. Because I am a researcher, so when I look at biodiversity data, I'm not only thinking at it from the place of biodiversity data mobilization, but from data use, because I got interested in GBIF because I wanted to use GBIF data. So I want to spend a few minutes introducing GBIF and then talk about data quality, both data quality coming into GBIF and data quality going out of GBIF, and then some recent data on data use, emphasizing Spanish data use, which you'll be glad to see is very high and prolific. And then talk a little bit more about the GBIF network. I'm just going to be highlighting some areas. So if there's things you want to come back and talk with me afterwards, I'd be happy to do that. I'll try to hit some highlights here. So as Christina mentioned, GBIF is an intergovernmental network of people and research infrastructure. It's important that it's both the research infrastructure and the people. And my first year at the Secretariat really understood how important the network of people are to making GBIF successful. And that's really the key to it. And it really is open data. It doesn't cost anything for anybody to submit data to GBIF, and it doesn't cost anything for data to be downloaded from GBIF. And that's part of our mission because we are funded by national governments. So there is quite a bit of data that's published through GBIF. We like to show this graph showing how the data mobilization. So the data is mobilized, as I'll show on a slide, through thousands of different institutions like the Botanic Gardens here, through this network into through gbif.org, and then data is distributed through gbif.org. But we have a lot of data in GBIF. Most of it is animals, a lot of plant data, and very little of microbial data. But the data has been growing in leaps and bounds over the last few years, and that's mainly due to bringing in new sources of data. So we have about almost 1.4 billion data records in GBIF. So that includes all the data mobilized here in Spain. This comes from over 50,000 data sets. So GBIF, the main purpose of the infrastructure is take this data flow from 50,000 different data sets and put it into one data set basically that you can access, make sense out of, and then use in your work and research. And that's a big operation for us. We're based on a memorandum of understanding that's signed by countries and at Fundus, and very grateful for Spain to be part of that network. We have 59 participating countries. 40 of those are full members or dues-paying members like Spain. We also have many participating organizations that are international in nature that work with us. And an example of that would be LifeWatch ERIC here in Spain, and also DISCO, which is a European organization. So the number that really amazes me is this number here over my shoulder. So we have 1.3 billion records in GBIF, but every month 39.8 billion records go out. So almost every day, 1 billion records from this network are being downloaded and used by somebody. That's a really big number. We're getting also about 10 to 20 new data sets every day. So there's a flow of data into GBIF that is very fast coming in and very fast going out. And it's beyond our scope to actually look at every single data point that comes into GBIF. So we rely on the national nodes to help us with the data quality. But this number has been jumping, and we're very happy about that. So we have many different streams of occurrence data within GBIF, and kind of the most fundamental one from when we started 20 years ago was collection data. And this is the collection data from, for example, from here at the herbarium, which I just got a tour of. So we have about 250 to 300 million records of data mobilized from natural history museums. And this is really the core data because it is all can be referenced back to a physical specimen. And that is foundational in research and in policy-driven use of data. And this will continue to be a major emphasis for the Secretariat and for the national nodes. But we're also harvesting data from literature. This is the Royal We. This is partners that we work with, the Biodiversity Heritage Library, PLASI, European Journal Taxonomy. So we do take individual data points from the literature. That rise in the amount of records in GBIF over the last few years is because of citizen science. About over half of our records in GBIF are from citizen science. And some of these are really fantastic records. We have records of the distribution of birds through eBird, which we really should look at to be the desired level of data for every single taxon. There's bird data from all over the world, and we need to have data from every taxonomic unit from all over the world. We actually, with the bird data, you can look at species richness data in West Africa, and it makes sense because there's enough data from birds in West Africa. So that's a goal that we should have for the Secretariat. A new set of data occurrences that are coming into GBIF is sequence data. So we're not DNA sequencing and we're not holding sequences, but a lot of sequence data has occurrence data with it, especially soil-based metagenomic sequences. And I really think this could be a new flow of data for GBIF. We're currently getting data from sequences from the Barcode of Life. So all the Barcode of Life bins, those bins are now part of GBIF. We're getting data from fungal metagenomics from Estonia organization. And we're also getting from Magnify, which is coming via the UK. So these are metagenomics data sets. And there's really a possibility in the next few years to have really detailed soil metagenomic data sets. So we can look at have measures of the soil biodiversity, and we can start correlating that with other data sets, such as remote sensing. We're really planning ahead for this because there could be billions, literally billions of records coming in every year from metagenomics. It's a completely different type of data that we need to be ready for, but it's exciting. So in general, these are records that are what species or what taxonomic unit, because we're not only indexing species now, we're indexing barcode bins, we're indexing hypothetical taxonomic units, because not everything in biodiversity has a name on it. We wish it did, but we can't wait for those names, so we're putting things in as bins. And the data is where it is found and what is evidence for those for the data. So at the Secretariat, most of the data that we are mediating for our community is used for research, but there is this very strong interest in, I think everyone would agree with this, we want our biodiversity data to be used in the decision-making process. We have a crisis in the world, and we have data that we are mobilizing, and we want it to be used for evidence-based decision-making. And we really feel that GBIF data, mediated data, is the foundational data that should be used for international organizations like the Group of Earth Observations, which makes essential biodiversity variables that can be used to assess biodiversity through the IPBES methods and can be used to report on goals at the Convention for Biological Diversity. This is an important year, the 2030 targets, the post-2020 year. So the new targets for 2030 are being developed right now, and we are a part of that process for the community. And this is something that I've learned in my year at GBIF, is that this is very important, especially in some of our new member countries in Africa, is having some training and help in order to use their biodiversity data to report on these mechanisms. Okay, data quality. So this is kind of a fun map. So this is biodiversity data in gbif.org. This is a density map. So if you look at this map, you might think that Belgium is the most biodiverse country in the world. It's the brightest, but of course it's not. But this map is where we have the data, and it's actually a very good map if you were to compare it to where the money of the world is. It is a high correlation with that, which should become too much of a surprise, because areas with have more amount of money have a more money to spend on biodiversity information. So at the Secretariat, we're really interested in filling in data gaps. So getting data from this part of the world, because that's where we really need to have data to make informed decision makings. So at the Secretariat, we're funded by the national governments, but we don't use that fund from the governments to pay people to digitize. We just certainly don't have enough of money for that. However, before I got to the Secretariat, some special programs were started through the EU. So I guess this is your taxpayer money through the EU DevCo. And we received 5 million euros, and it's now been expanded to 7 million euros. And there's some money from Japan as well to support this program called Biodiversity Information for Development, or BID. And so over the past several years, we have funded projects in Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, the Pacific Island nations, and the EU definition of the Caribbean, so the Caribbean islands, and brought data into GBIF. Specifically to fill these data gap areas geographically, but also taxonomically. And a lot of these projects have an emphasis on data for decision making. And this isn't just an effort of the Secretariat. This is a global effort with national nodes. The Spanish node has been very collaborative and helpful in this program and other outreach activities we have throughout the world, and especially in Latin America. We thank you for that. So this is just some of the results from this investment from DevCo. So DevCo invested 5 million euros in this, and they actually gave us an extra 2 million euros without having to write another grant. So they were very happy with it. So anytime somebody gives you money without having to write in the grant, you just say thank you and take the money. So we got, through this one program, 67 new data publishers. So these are the areas of the world where we didn't have much data, but now there are active data publishing communities in all these countries. These are new, just lat long coordinates. So now there's a lot more data coming in from Sub-Saharan Africa. You can especially see there in the Pacific Islands as well. But most of these projects were in Sub-Saharan Africa. So there's more data coming in. It's not enough. I'm not trying to say it's enough, but they're now the infrastructure and networks being developed in these countries, partially through GBIF and this program, to mobilize data. New data sets are coming in from different institutions. The gray bars are before the program and the colored bars are afterwards. But there's new data sets coming in from the project. And I really like these numbers. So through this, over the first 3 years of the project, there were nearly 40,000 unique species came into GBIF. 2,400 of these taxa were new to GBIF. So we didn't have any data on nearly 2,400 species. And now we have data because of this program, including some for threatened red list species. And overall, 1.3 million data points. So that's 0.1% of the overall data, but it's very specifically to areas that we didn't have data. And because of this result, DevCo gave us an extension to the project. So if anybody has any rich relatives, we're actively seeking money to extend this project. We hired a consultant to identify potential. We're a small secretariat. We don't have expertise in fundraising, so we hired a consultant to identify some potential funding sources where we could get more money to extend this project and maybe go broader into Latin America or even Central Asia and other areas where there are data gaps. So that's a big focus of the Secretariat. But along with these training programs, along with the data mobilization is this whole suite of training programs. And this is really where the GBIF network and nodes like GBIF Spain and France play very important roles in the training aspect in areas that just don't have the infrastructure to participate in biodiversity informatics. So not only we teach courses in biodiversity mobilization, data use for decision making, and how to establish a participant node and become a member of the network. And we've brought in about 13 new countries into the GBIF network because of this program. Node management, and I should have put on this slide the Living Atlas community, because the Living Atlas community, which is being driven mainly out of here in Madrid from the Australian Living Atlas, is really a part of this international development as well. And the node here in Madrid has a e-learning platform where a lot of these curricula lie, and it can be used by anyone, freely openly available. So it's not only data mobilization, it's training and community building as well. So and we're trying to build an international community. Okay, so this is my transition slide to data quality. So GBIF has been criticized, rightly so, for data quality. It's kind of a poor term, but we like to use the term fitness for use. We're taking this data from 50,000 different data sets. It has various levels of completeness in the data fields. And sometimes when you transfer large bits of data, it doesn't translate as properly as you would like. So we are developing a 2 to 3 year surge on data quality at the Secretariat. We're trying out a few things this year, and this is going to be a focus for us going forward. And I just want to demonstrate some of the things we're doing. These are things in progress that you'll be seeing over the next few months and few years. So I'm going to use my data as an example. This is the case of Drummondii, a cute little species that's endemic to southwestern Australia. But if you go into gbif.org, you can see these 5 spots here. These are real records in GBIF, and there are plants growing in those areas. But as a research scientist, I don't want to have that in my data set. I want to know the native distribution, which is over here. But these are real. This is a data point, which is a centroid for Australia. Some data sets come in and say, this is a centroid for the data, and it's marked that. Other data sets come in which they are not marked as centroids, and we do not know that they are centroids. Likewise, these 4 dots in the bottom here are botanic gardens, and this is in Canberra, where I used to work. So those are real data points, but it's botanic garden data. And the field in the data coming in was not marked appropriately. And that happens, we understand that. So we have a new infrastructure that Tim Robertson and the informatics group are implementing right now. Actually, they're having a meeting this afternoon on how they're to roll this out. But we developed some mechanisms to automatically identify these type of occurrences in gbif.org and flag them as suspicious, so that someone can easily get a data set download that doesn't have these centroids that aren't marked, botanic gardens, zoos, filtering out hippopotamuses in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Those things happen because there are errors coming in the record, and we're going to be much better at identifying those and marking those as suspicious, with the goal of making the data use fitter for use so that there's less data quality checks has to be used when you download the data. So we're going to be able to mark those and flag those. So how many people know that we have 1.5 million species page on gbif.org? So for every species that you search on GBIF, there's a species page for it, which is quite impressive. This is another Australian species that I study, Acacia delbata. It gives you some just raw information here. There are 32,000 occurrences with this species in 4 subspecies. From this data page, we also have aggregated from all your data over 3,200 occurrences with images. So these are the images from iNaturalist and herbarium voucher images. So those are all linked out from the species page. And here's the occurrence page for delbata. Also, we work very closely with Catalog of Life. Actually, we have 2 full-time staff members who are working on Catalog of Life, which is a taxonomic initiative to make one uniform, complete taxonomy of life on Earth. And we are moving to using that as a backbone for gbif.org, and that's going to hopefully happen in the next year. If you'd like to talk about that later, I'd be happy to talk about that more. But I'd like to show this example because, again, this species is endemic to southeastern Australia, but you can see there are occurrences all over the world. That's because this is a major invasive species, as many of you know, because it's all over Spain and the Iberian Peninsula. We have been working with the IUCN in their Global Register for Introduced and Invasive Species, and they have now nearly completed a list of invasive species for each country and major conservation areas. So we now have a listed here of 29 countries in which this species is known as invasive, and they're all listed right here. Just the top 3 are listed here, but we know that they are invasive in all these different countries. So we're now going to be able to flag these types of data sets and checklists. So you can go to a species list and you could check a box and you could filter out all the known invasive species, or maybe you just want to know the invasive species. So we'll be able, this new functionality called filter by checklist, where you'll be able to take checklist data and compare it to the occurrence of individual species, which I think will have some profound, or hopefully research implications. Okay, so next I want to present what I'm calling community curated biodiversity data. I think this is an idea that has been attempted in the past, but we're gonna keep trying on it because this new infrastructure that I just mentioned is really gonna help us with this. The idea is to develop expert groups. And most of my examples, I'm a legume systematist, and I'm working very closely with the legume research community to have an example of this. But to have a community develop that has a kind of a loose-knit governance structure that says, we're a group of taxonomists, and we're going to get an expert view of biodiversity data and make a clean view of occurrences, a clean view of taxonomy, and a clean view of phylogenetics. And we're going to use some tools that were developed in gbif.org to help implement this and to flag those occurrences which are suspicious, and then develop messaging systems so that those flags can be sent down to the data holders, and if they have the resources, to be able to update data and to check those occurrences. But we realize that the institutional copy of all the data rests at the local level, and we can't make changes to that. That's not how we operate. But we can flag things that we think might have some question marks, and we want to have a better process of sending those question marks back down to the data providers, and hopefully we can get that data updated more quickly. But what we can do at gbif.org is to mark that data. And we want to make experts make the decisions and really develop an expert curated view of the data with a goal to stop this repetitive cleaning of data. Because everyone who is doing species distribution modeling downloads a data set and they clean it up and then they use it. And that happens probably hundreds of times per day. What we would like to get to the point is we have a curated data set that can be used with certain flags that can be used for species distribution modeling, so that obviously some people are always going to want to look at the data very carefully and clean it by themselves, and you're right and you should do that. But there are other users who would be very happy to have a curated data set. And we're using this kind of slogan, powered by GBIF. We don't want to be the center of it. We want to use the GBIF architecture to make this happen. So how this might work is like this. So this is similar to the example I just said. So Acacia gilbertii is another, it's a cute little species that's in southwestern Australia, but this is an occurrence at some plants I had growing in the glass house. So let's say I'm part of this legume community and I want to have, and we want to curate this species. So we as a community, we decide that this occurrence record has the wrong flags on it, and we're going to flag it as suspicious and then ask and send a message back to the Australian National Herbarium and say, this one it is indeed a gilbertii, but it doesn't grow in the glass house. It's just missed database. And then we can develop this communication, and then hopefully that data point will just go away because it's now been properly, and the expert view by the taxonomist is this view of the data in southwestern Australia. Same with taxonomy. This will be mainly done through Catalog of Life, but when a new taxonomic treatment comes out, of course, where that taxonomy was updated, everyone does their best to update the identifications within the collection, but there really isn't a mechanism to get that information out to other collections. People rely on the literature, and everyone has to see the literature. And let's be honest, we don't have the time or resources to do this as well either. So if the taxonomic community can kind of be the governance and structure for this, and they can update the taxonomy within the Catalog of Life at their institution and curate the taxonomy, and the Catalog of Life and the World Flora Online are all moving towards a structure in which the community can actually update the taxonomy themselves. They don't have to go through a middle person. So we need a governance structure so that we can, not just anybody can update the taxonomy, but the experts will be able to go in, update the taxonomy and the synonymies, how they think it should be, and that will be the GBIF view and the global view for that taxonomy. And that is part of this community curation process that we envision. Early next month, the Catalog of Life is having their annual meeting, and I really hope that after that meeting we'll be in a place where we can start doing this a little bit more closely. I'm a phylogeneticist. I spent my time developing phylogenies and integrating spatial data with phylogenies. It's very important to me. We also have a system in phylogenetics to aggregate phylogenetic trees. The one I'm familiar with is Open Tree of Life. It's what we funded when I was at the National Science Foundation. It is a synthetic tree of life. They have a phylogenetic tree with about 1.5 million terminals on it. And anybody can go in and take a phylogeny and put it part of that feed it into their system for developing synthetic phylogeny of life. And right now it's very ad hoc. People have to do it on their own. And I would like to use this expert taxonomic community, again, to kind of mediate the flow of information from phylogenies into OpenTree, because I want to use a very good synthetic tree of life with the evolutionary relationships of life within gbif.org in a couple of years to give a phylogenetic view, an evolutionary view of biodiversity data. So what I'm envisioning here is a four-part community curation effort, with one which is focused on occurrence data using gbif.org infrastructure. The second being taxonomies, which is with gbif.org and mainly Catalog of Life. And then the third being with Open Tree of Life, but kind of coordinated into a loose-knit project together to help community curated data. And the fourth box is the most difficult box, and that, of course, is traits. And down the line, it'd be really wonderful to have curated trait data to link together with all of these other data. But first things first. Okay, so the kind of the vision for data quality is we do have this improved infrastructure now that allows for higher data quality, and that's going to be rolling out. In our revised budget, we are going to fund another communications officer. It's very difficult, I think, for us to get the knowledge of what gbif.org does with your data out to the community. So we're going to really have a kind of a promotion of GBIF.org to make sure everyone knows about the value proposition of GBIF.org, but also the new infrastructure that we have. So this is going to start with automated data flagging of the data, like I mentioned before, botanic gardens and centroids. But also we have somebody coming from Kew Botanic Gardens to the Secretariat she has a protocol for duplicate detection. So as botanists, we're very good or bad, depending on how you look at it, going to a tree and taking 5 cuttings of it and sending it to 5 different places. And then each of those specimens takes on its life of its own. So, maybe the taxonomy is updated on this one, but not on this one. Maybe there's an image here, DNA extracted here, and that comes into gbif.org as 4 separate entries. They all are important, but they're not connected. And Nikki has a protocol to link all those different data duplicates together, I think, which would be fantastic for especially the botanical community. And then on the longer time frame, 2 to 3 years, starting with a test case this year, see if we can build this curation of biodiversity data with expert groups that really integrates and improves catalog of life and taxonomies. But we envision a more a different view of gbif.org, because right now everything is served to gbif, to our users through our taxonomic backbone. And we interpret the data from that you send to us. So we're working on and a lot of people don't like that. And I understand why they want to have the original annotations. So we're going to be able to allow people to access gbif.org using their own taxonomies. And that's important for nations important because in many countries, there are specific species which have a Latin name that need to be conserved. But if that isn't the accepted name anymore in your country for that species, that's a problem. But a country can actually go and say, we're going to use this taxonomy, and then they can pull that data and make more appropriate use of their data. So there's a lot of nuances here that we're trying to solve. And of course, I haven't gotten into this, but this is all about all data actions are linked and traceable. So really having persistent identifiers in order to trace and keep this data together. So I'm going to go to data use. Quickly here, there are 38 million records about Spain in gbif.org, and there are 38 million records from Spain about the world. That's a nice symmetry there. So there are data from 44 countries that have data about Spain, and Spain has data from about 230 countries. And there are 117 publishers in Spain. We have a lot of information on our pages here. So here are our 2019 numbers, which I like to show you because they're pretty good. So these are the number of occurrences published during 2019. So Spain published over 10 million records, which was 10th in ranking. And by far, Spain is not the 10th largest country by population. So it's a good amount of data coming in from Spain. Here at the Botanic Garden, we have a web page for every data set at gbif.org in every publisher. So this is the publisher data set for here at the gardens. And you can see up here, there are almost 2.9 million registered occurrences from 13 different data sets with 296 citations. And this is the distribution of the data here at the Botanic Garden. And we automatically make lots of different views of this. So this is the taxonomic profile of the data here at the gardens that's served through gbif.org. And I think this is a pretty good number. There are 305,000 images as well. So all those images that are on your server, we link out to. We don't store those images, but we link out. So when somebody wants to do a search on a particular taxon, we're able to integrate the images from this garden with images from Portugal, images from France, and all in one area, which is really the power of gbif.org. So we also have individual occurrence pages as well. So not only does each of those species have a page that aggregates the data from a species, but you can drill down and look at an individual occurrence. So this is one of the occurrences from here at the museum, and you have this in your database as well. I don't want to say that this is the only thing that we're doing, but this is showing how the data is in your own system, is how it shows up in gbif.org, including the image here. And this is the original data and the interpreted data through gbif.org, and that's where the data point is. So we're really trying to take advantage of linking all the data that's accessible. Okay, so web traffic for data use. I mentioned that there's almost 1 billion records a day are being used by gbif.org, or download from gbif.org. Spain is number 6 in the number in web traffic. So nearly 4% of the total sessions are from Spain. I think it's interesting here, this number here is quite small. So when people go to gbif.org, they only look at a few pages. So they're making a search on a particular species or a group or geographic area, and they're downloading that data, and then they're going away. So people don't go to gbif.org and just kind of play around and look at pages. But that's kind of why I wanted to show the species pages and the occurrence pages, because there's a lot of information packed in there. And we want to start to promote that a little bit more. Download requests are similar. Spain is number 6 in download requests. And we implemented, I like to say we because I had nothing to do with it. This is way before I got there. But Donald Holborn and the crew there implemented, we actually hired a full-time person to track the data use at gbif.org. So we give a DOI, a digital object identifier, to any download of data from GBIF, and we can track that DOI through the internet. And anytime that DOI is cited in a publication, we know exactly which records and which data sets and which publishers those records come from, and we can give credit to those. And this is really state-of-the-art, and it's something we're going to be promoting a lot in the next year, because it really shows the value of the work. So for last year, we had there were 743 publications that cited gbif.org in this data analysis. Now that's got to be a minimal number, because we know there are data papers in Japanese and Chinese language that we're not counting. This is only people that are citing the DOI and giving proper credit for it. So there's other data that people that use the API use R to access the data. We're probably not getting all of that, but this is a minimal number. But this is growing, and we would like to see it grow faster. And here are some of the examples of some of the 296 citations from the Botanic Gardens here. These are papers written by Spanish researchers about Spanish flora, but I can't say for sure, but I'm sure that all these papers are going to have data from outside of Spain. And a lot of these papers are written by research in the US or China or other places in Europe. So it's really the power of data aggregation is allowing people to do research that simply couldn't do without when your data is aggregated together. And we are tracking this very closely. There's 296 citas. Is that the right word? Yeah, okay. You probably did the translation. Okay. Okay, so we're tracking this data citation. In 2019, there were 50 cited papers with Spanish authors. That was 6 in the regional totals. So a high level of data use here in Spain. Every year, there's an example in the room outside, but we do a science review which highlights the different science areas that's used by users of gbif.org. And we use this to tell our funders to say, your data is being used for human health research. There's data on tracking of bats for human health as a vector for diseases, zoonotic diseases. And there's some papers that use GBIF data to predict disease outbreaks in humans. And the data is used for many different interesting reasons. In fact, I was in Japan a few months ago, and the night before, a data set was published that used gbif.org data for tsunami predictions. And I was in Japan, so of course I highlighted that during my talk. But it's being used all over. And we actually we funded a study to do a really in-depth, detailed look at the 2,500 papers that have used gbif.org to really understand how they're using the data and the networks of people that are using them. This is my preeminent data use. So the IPCC report that came out last year referenced this Warren et al. Paper. This Warren et al. Paper, so this is the paper that described the differences in biodiversity outlook versus a 1.5 degree climate change versus a 2 degree. This Warren et al. Paper used 385 million GBIF records. So I can safely say to any government minister that'll listen to me that your data was used in the IPCC report. And we're really trying to build this bridge to show government ministers that anybody decision-making that the data produced here at the herbarium is being used in public decision-making process all over the world, not only just in research scientists. So this is from 2018 when they downloaded the data. If they were to download that data, the same search today, they'd get over 1 billion records. That's because more data coming in, more information to make better decisions, and that's what a major role of gbif.org. So we're gonna have a kind of a communications event on Cite the DOI later this year to try to promote the use of the data citation. If you're a herbarium worker and you don't know about Bloodhound Track, please look at it. It's a fantastic way to track and show how your data, how your work is being used. And as I mentioned, we have a current review of the DOI literature. And we are working more closely with other users like GeoBond, LifeWatch Eric. I'll meet with LifeWatch Eric tomorrow to see how the GBIF data can be used in decision making. So just a quick promotion of the Alliance for Biodiversity Knowledge. 2 years ago at the Secretariat, while the GBIF Secretariat and our network does a lot of work in many different areas, we can't do everything, and there are other parts of the network like the Atlas of Living Australia, iDigBio in the US, like GeoBond, like LifeWatch Eric, and we've developed a mechanism where we can work together and try to understand where we can work without overlapping and be as efficient as possible. And to do that, we developed something called the Alliance for Bio.org, which is basically just a loose net organization to help us work together better. So please go to allianceforbio.org if you're interested in this idea. The first thing that the Alliance is doing is we're holding a virtual workshop. Because at the Secretariat, we're very cognizant of the problem of not everybody can attend meetings, especially in developing countries, having the funding to attend these big meetings that we have here in Europe. So we're having a virtual workshop on a global collections catalog. That's going to be in March and in April. No one has to travel for it. It's going to be a curated discussion section with discussion line threads with some talks as well to develop a mechanism, a roadmap for developing a collections catalog. I just wanted to throw in that we, as an international organization, we strive to be multilingual, even though I'm not today. We have our interface in 8 languages, and we're actually working on Arabic to get that as part of our interface as well. And this is part of the problem of, in Asia, we really need to have more Asian languages to get better work there. I just want to put a quick note for the Spanish Node leadership. The Spanish Node has been very important in gbif.org, obviously with the high levels of data mobilization. Vicente are the leaders in the Living Atlases community and taking the data portals and expanding them throughout the world and allowing countries to show their data. Lots of work with us in the mentors and training and GBIF activities. We use the Spanish e-learning platform that's used globally as a resource for teaching. And Spain has always been a leader in our capacity enhancement support program in reaching out and developing collaborations and building the GBIF network. And it's especially helpful in Latin America, where we try to do things in local languages. So the help of the GBIF Spain is very important there and appreciated. So last year we had last slide here, a value proposition discussion at our governing board meeting. And this is how I kind of boiled down what gbif.org, what the community in GBIF tells us about GBIF. So they tell us that GBIF is the go-to source for biodiversity data, occurrence data. I don't think anybody would argue with that. That's a very key part of gbif.org. But this was very eye-opening for me. But GBIF was really seen as an international collaboration of people network that museum workers really found important to make their data more efficient and more valuable. It really gives a sense of community to workers that aren't researchers. The researchers have their own communities, but GBIF gives museum workers that community, which was very good to hear. I think we are a leader in open data standards and data reuse. And we are providing data for decision making, but we do need to do more in this area. We're being asked to do more in this area. So that was more than 40 minutes probably. All right, so thank you very much. Yeah, I think most of the data use are from scientists, and the scientists are using that to build products for decision making. So part of the goal of this is to make the data better for naive users, like that journalist, like a policy planner that doesn't have that background or the time. So can we have a filtered data set that will be appropriate for those uses? So we have a science committee, and we have a new science committee member, Enrique Meyer from UNAM in Mexico City, and he's a top-notch species distribution modeler. And we're going to work with him to get what are the filters when he's doing species distribution model. He's going to take GBIF data and he's going to manipulate it so he can use it. What are those steps? And can we implement those steps at gbif.org so he doesn't have to do that? And it doesn't have to be repeated. I mean, maybe he still wants to do that because particular thing, but maybe others don't want to do that. So to help the naive user come to better results, because this data is complicated, and to make it more user friendly, fitness for use is the term. It's not going to be simple.
Another question is related to the first one. Is you mentioned at the beginning the observation data, for instance, by ornithologists or and what's the situation with other groups of organisms? Because I remember times in which the big argument was the quality data at the beginning for GBIF.
Yeah, I've learned a lot in the last year. I'm still learning. So organizations like iNaturalist are kind of ideal in that regard, in that they have a research grade level. So the data does not come in raw. It has to be an image, and it has to have somebody else identify it, not just the person. So that isn't perfect, but it's better than some other citizen science ones I learned in the last few months. Comes like some fish data sets come in without a photograph. It's just somebody who is snorkeling and sees a fish and says it's this. And that may be true, but the evidence for that is much different than iNaturalist. And there's a whole continuum there. So we have to come up with ways of marking that data from here to here to say that this is probably higher, it has better evidence than this data evidence, and we need to be able to serve that to the community so people know what they're using. Because we get emails, rightly so, from people saying, well, that's not what that fish cannot possibly be here. And we need to work, because this is a reputational thing for us as well. We can't have that data. So if that happened with one data set, and we have that data set actually going off at gbif.org until we can get a better data quality for that. But we work with the national node and the data providers for that. So I guess I was a bit naive coming in. I thought there was a better data quality evidence behind some of our data sets than there are. So there's a lot of work to be done with that. And the same with the sequence data. So some of those we're having evidence of plants in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The trouble there was that it was a data set that was a sequence-based data set that was basically blasting against a microbial data set, but it wasn't, and there's some small fragments from DNA sequencing. There wasn't quality control on the length of read and the percent match. So there's going to be random stuff there. So what we're doing is we're going to trim out anything that isn't microbial from that data set. And we're starting a process to develop standards for that, which is going to be a huge task because people are using different genes for different organisms, different, 99% match and 97% match. I didn't realize that was going to be part of the job, but that's something we got to do right away because the quality of the data is going to suffer. And we want to do that before we're bringing on billions of data points in microbial data.
Thanks very much.
if anybody has ideas on doing these things faster or better, we're certainly open. We have 2 people that are coming to the Secretariat this year because they have developed tools or ideas that they think we can implement. And we just met somebody last week who had some great ideas on data quality and identifying invasive species from GBIF data. So we're going to bring him to the Secretariat and maybe implement his data quality ideas in gbif.org. Fantastic, because we don't have the capacity to do that.
So it's a question actually related to what Gonzalo just asked about this all this citizen science initiative, like you are promoting to provide data for the GBIF. So for the moment, if I understand it correctly, there's no way to separate this data from the data provided by other more reliable sources.
There is, but we need to be better at communicating it. There's a basis of observation in the search that you can go to that and you can click in the box on specimen on, what's it called, specimen, and then that will give you only specimen-based observations. There's a bit of a overlap between citizen science and sampling event data, and we need to figure out exactly how to divide that, or maybe it's actually going to be an overlap. But I don't think we communicate that well enough that we actually can do that. So that's going to be part of this communication. You're going to get lots of little videos, hopefully, very soon on different things we can do at gbif.org because we can do that, and I don't think people know. So that's a great observation that we can do that, but we need to do better at communicating it.
Yeah. So I guess you are also like developing some strategies to
yeah.
I don't know, to improve the quality of the data from all this massive.
Yeah. Exactly. So we have teams in the office. We have data products, which looks at data quality. So they're one finding out the things that we need to flag and how to flag it. And then we have the infrastructure group, which actually does an implementation. And then we got to have comms in there to make that information out. And that's why we're hiring another comms person, because next time I come, I want you to know that because we told you, make it easier for that. But there's a lot of stuff going on in gbif.org at the interface. And I'm considering maybe we need to have a consultant to we did this when we were in Australia, a PhD student who was studying how people look at the interface and how they interact with a web page. And maybe we need to study how people interact with the interface so that we can put the data in the right place that people. How many people know that you can actually select data points on the portal as well? And so you can go to one visualization and you can click on one box and you can highlight part of the app. Like you can in Living Atlases, you can highlight 10 points and then you get all the occurrences. That you can do that at gbif.org. I don't think too many people know about that. But we need to communicate these things better.
I'm not sure if this is implemented, but I think it's not. Wouldn't it be useful to have just a written statement about the actual native range of the species in the species page, like to the best of our knowledge, the latest publication by an expert, just that people can contrast that quickly with the map. If the range is Australia and there is a point in South America, you see this distribution statement there, where the species actually occurs, like, a broadly statement. It doesn't have to be in detail.
I would love to have that. A couple different ways to data mine that information and bring it into the web page. I'm not sure how easy that is. We have invasive species lists. There are checklists of native plants. So maybe that's the next thing we need to do, is try to get checklists of native plants and organize them and bring them on and display them on country web pages. There are also, the IUCN has range maps for, I don't know how many species. We have an MOU with them to allow us to use those range maps. So maybe we can, this isn't simple on the infrastructure though, but to show the IUCN range map of, I think that is a native range map over the point, so then some of those issues would go away. But we're open to ideas.
I think there are ways. For example, from a taxonomic revision, each species has a distribution statement. it occurs, blah, 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 any country. So if you have that statement from the last publication, that would be very useful for a journalist to, he sees or she sees that the species occurs only in Southern Africa, and there is a point in the Mediterranean. Hopefully, it will be easier for him to say, oh, maybe this point is not, something like that.
We'll think more about that. That's as
So the literature, I guess, is
Yeah.
the most expert information.
Because that's the type of data I wanted as a researcher as well. I think it's a difficult solution, but I think we do need to do better at that, absolutely. Standards. I have a question for you. So, any researchers in the audience, would you be interested in this idea of community curated biodiversity data? Would you spend your time doing that? Would that be useful? Or am I just making things up that's gonna wait, no one's gonna use? I think my Ligon community has been asking for this, but I have no idea about other communities. Would that be useful? If we have the tools so that you're not spending lots of time doing it, but could slowly work through data? Okay. I remember your faces.
Okay, I think if there are no more questions, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.